What's up, everybody? This is Brandon Lilly here with the Sorinex Be Legendary podcast. I'm currently sitting in Austin, Texas. Been down here for the Power Athlete Symposium. Currently sitting with Adam Nelson, who, by all accounts, is a phenomenal athlete. He was an Olympic shot putter, awarded the gold medal, and just a very, very interesting guy and a person that I've been really, really privileged to get to know in the last few years. And I think Adam is a guy that I know has had some demons similar to the ones that I've had, and he's overcome them. He's standing. He's put himself back together and seems to be enjoying life, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Brandon. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah. So let's get right into this. What did you think about the weekend?
So, we were actually talking about this prior to this, but like last year I came to my first Power Athlete group and symposium, and I wasn't and for some reason, the experience, it felt a little bit more forced to me, and I wasn't quite bonding or whatever it was. But this year, there was a little bit more magic for me, and I felt like I was connecting to a lot more people that I didn't really know last year, and building that brotherhood and building those friendships that you know are going to support you down the road too.
Well, I get it, and it's not the people. A lot of times, and I'm not saying this is what you did, but for me, the feeling that I had that I didn't fit in or that maybe I wasn't one of the cool kids kind of deal was really the way that I walked into a room. I've talked about it to a few people, but I can plainly remember meeting you at Summer Strong, and really one of the first times that I was speaking, and I walk in and I fully thought that I was there to be something, like I'm a speaker here. And I thought that really meant something. But then, Bert's like, hi, I'm the president of the company. I'd like to introduce you to this guy. He's a Navy SEAL. This guy's an Olympic medalist. This guy's this, and this lady is that. And it really brought me down. And then I kind of pulled away because I have no reason to be here. But overall, I think the changes that I've made within myself make me more comfortable in a room like that. Yeah. Not because I realize that I'm less or more. I just realize that I'm here.
Yeah.
So I got to make the most of it. And I kind of see that with you too, because I've seen the years where you're kind of tucked away maybe more to yourself. And I've seen you also now, last night was fantastic. It was awesome to see, because I know that feeling of isolating yourself.
Right.
What do you think it is, the commonality between athletes, guys like us that, obviously you hit a phenomenal level going to the Olympic Games, and we'll talk to that measure in a minute. But are guys like us, I don't want to say broken, but what makes us different like that?
So, I don't think broken is the right word. I think what it is we become so singular and focused that we can't look beyond what our goals are and our objectives are. And when you compete in an individual sport and there's not that forced team or that forced community, everything that lines up in your life lines up to get you really good at one specific task, or in yours 3, but whatever, they're all related, right? So what you end up doing is you only let people in who are going to positively influence that one goal.
Right.
And then if you do it long enough, all the people that were your good buddies and your friends and your support staff and your family and whoever it was, it's not that they don't like you anymore or love you and respect what you're doing. It's just that you've never answered their calls for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And so I vividly remember the hardest part about stepping away from sport, stepping away from track and field, was not necessarily stopping competing.
Right.
It was stopping. It was pulling myself away from my track and field family, who I saw sort of only seasonally, and finding a way to reconnect with my friends, who they didn't hold it against me. But I sacrificed those relationships in pursuit of this
thing.
You're
right.
And it wasn't really until I was finished throwing when I looked around and I was like, holy cow, I'm married. I love my wife. I've got 2 great kids, but I'm lonely as crap. Yeah. I miss, and you don't realize how lonely you are when you're at the top and you're so focused on the goal, because satisfaction is driven by the process that gets you in the opportunity to win those medals.
For sure. Well, something that kind of trying to piece back some relationships in my life that, for the very same reason you speak of, were strained. And I think that people look at me and they're like, man, it's just powerlifting. You know, how did you get so far down this rabbit hole of like isolation and pulling yourself away? And just, it wasn't that I knew what I was doing. I just thought, you know what, if I don't go out, if I eat my meals, if I train this hard, that's one step closer. And then it's like, okay, you have a bad meet. What did I do different this time? So then you just start eliminating things. But I was talking to my dad, and he said, I've always worried about you, talking to me, about the fact of you doing individual sports. He said, because it trains you that even your teammates are your competition. So to go back to that room setting, when I walk into a room full of high caliber people, I got this one over on that guy. Maybe he's got this over on me. That's not how you should walk into a room. And it just became a very destructive mindset that I was in competition, not only with the people that I, thought were competing with me, and they weren't, but also with who I thought I was. I didn't know who I thought I was, so I thought I had to be what they wanted me to be, or what I should be more like them. And really, that's one of the worst things to feel, is like you don't know who you are. And I was a power lifter. That was what my existence revolved around, that world, between checking posts to have an argument, or to talk about training, or watch a video. I mean, it was 24 hours a day. If I was up, I was involved in it. Is that how you felt with your throwing? I mean, was it an all-in mentality when you were go time?
Yes and no. So my all-in mentality on it was that I would forego other activities that could jeopardize my ability to be healthy or my ability to be focused. No, in the sense that, like, I really did value my time away from training, but I saw that as something that I needed to do to train. So, like,
right.
But I would, it's funny, like maybe I'm not being honest with myself. I think probably, yeah, because I wouldn't allow anything to compete with, like, whatever my goal was.
Right.
And the thought of bringing in something new, like, so the secret to success in sports like throwing, and I assume like lifting, is developing that process that, like, you don't ever change everything all at once.
Right.
If the process is working, you just introduce in one new stimulus at a time, at a time, and you see how that changes things. And so my whole concern was like, if I let something else in, I had this variable that I couldn't control for anymore. So it's like, how do I keep everything? And so maybe to your point, yeah, I think I was obsessive about it, but I used it as a reason not to go experience things.
Right.
The only experiences that I had to do with training and competing and that stuff. And to me, that's a real failure for guys like us. And we don't realize it until later. I've been fortunate enough to see people who really derive value from relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And with something like throwing, with something like lifting, there's a community of people that, like, you can invite into your sphere if you have the courage to do that. And
right.
Yeah, there may be some distractions they present, but you can develop a system and a process for that. And my concern was I didn't want to develop it. I didn't want to do that before. I felt like that was just wasted time and energy.
Right.
And I think on the backside of my career now, athletically, and trying to sort of repurpose myself, I've seen that there's a hell of a lot more value in opening up and using this as a way to open up to people, mm-hmm. rather than like close off to people.
Well, that's like I say last night, you get around people enough, you start to develop an expectation. My expectation is you're a deep water guy. You think really, really critically. You can have a good conversation, but I've never seen you kind of be the guy that really just lets it go. Big smile on your face. And, last night it was fantastic. I was sitting there when my friends Corey, Caitlin, and that group came in. You were over there with Ingrid and that group. Mm-hmm. And I was just watching you, when you bought me a beer, and I was sitting there standing, and I was like, dude's killing it right now. And it wasn't like you were doing anything different. You were just being yourself without the walls. That's mm-hmm. really what I've felt about you the last several times that we've talked. And one of the cool things, maybe shouldn't share this secret, but it's something that's really kind of pulled me through a few times. We have a text group, mm-hmm. And some of the conversations that we get into in there, or, it may not even be a conversation, but somebody will post something, and man, I think about all of it. I read it and read it again and look at some of the articles that are shared. I've never had that. up until that group really started. And I think that's something that I long for even more now, is because for the first time in my life at 36 years old, I mean, we're all in here, we're all in town for a reason, but there were little sects, like people breaking off and doing like sections, as in
Mm-hmm.
sects, people were breaking off, and this group went there and this group went there. But, I was like, hey guys, let's go here. And people went. I can
Mm-hmm.
remember a time in my life when first of all, I didn't know who to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, I knew the answer was no before I asked. So here I am with people that I genuinely love, Corey, Caitlin, their family, and then you guys. And it's like, man, I'm a lucky man. I'm looking around and I feel really, really lucky. What do you think happens? Do you think it's the recognition that the talents are fading, the thing that maybe gave you your shining light, and that little bit of an ego, the chip on your shoulder? Or do you think it's just you get a little bit older? Do you think you recognize that you can't do it forever, or what? Because I see so many guys have followed the path that we have: high achievement, struggle, redemption, right? And not even athletic redemption, just a redemption and reclamation of self. How did that? Am I off base for you, or am I on the right track?
No, I think you're on the right track. So I think it's a bit of all of the above. I think time and age give you a different perspective on things. I think that, well, for me personally, it was not using the reason why I was so driven and focused as like, it wasn't a source. Well, what ended up happening with me is I realized that I had to love the process of what I was doing. And this happened even within my athletic career.
Right.
There was a time when I was chasing moments or chasing medals, chasing money, whatever you want to call it. And you'd hit that objective or you fall short. If you hit that objective, like the second that moment was over that you wanted to achieve, like the second you hit a 600-pound, whatever it is, you realize, holy shit, there's no happiness in that moment.
No.
Like that's just it.
Right.
Like, what do I have to do to be happy again? For me, it was always 4 more years. I got to do it 4 more years,
right.
and go. And so I'd put the blinders on, and I'd convince myself that if I made it and had this opportunity one more time to compete in the Olympic Games, that was going to give me the happiness that I was looking for. And that's not it.
Right.
Right. So I think what ends up happening is, and it happened in my athletic career when I realized that it wasn't necessarily, that medal or that podium or that money. It was what I really enjoyed in my athletic career was this process of building myself to the superhuman version of an athlete. Now, what I didn't do at that time was really work on my non-athletic self. So when my athletic career was kind of over, even though I'd gone to grad school and I thought I got all these skills, I'm going to just like walk around. I'm going to retire tomorrow from throwing, and then like I'm going to kick ass in the business world in the same way. And it just didn't work like that because I never did the work on myself. And I did it as an athlete, but that work, it's the same model, but you got to just turn it on like this non-athletic you.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't consider myself still an athlete. It's just that 4 more years is not my mantra anymore.
Right.
I need to, and I don't define myself by that gold medal or how much money I'm going to make or not make. I define myself by like these specific values now that I had to create for my own self.
Right.
The Olympic model gave me a value system that I bought into.
Right.
And I never, and as a result, I don't think I really ever had to do any work on myself.
Right.
As long as I believed in those virtues and those values. And when that was no longer the value system that I was held accountable to, like I had to change my perspective,
right.
my life, and do a lot of introspection. It hasn't been an easy process, and it's still ongoing. But I think it's interesting and I say this now, and 6 months from now I'll be in a different position. But I feel like in the last 2 years, and maybe it's just age at this point, like I'm really hitting my stride as a non-athlete or non-competing athlete,
right.
In any formal sport necessarily.
How do you? I'm listening to you talk about the 4 more years, and obviously the Olympic Games are the penultimate achievement for the majority of athletes in the world. Like the Olympic Games is as big as it gets. Powerlifters, and I'll speak for myself, I operated in a 10 12, 16, 20 week mind frame.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 10 weeks of off season and then 10 weeks of competing. I think if I had the foresight to look at my career as let's make it last till you're 45. Let's be able to do this for 45 until you're 45 or however old you want to be. It would have changed how I did a lot of things. All I was worried about, which I know you understand because thrower, one more inch, that's all you're fighting for, right? And for us, it's one more pound. The only thing that made me feel good was that one more pound, but for not the right reasons. And I think for me, I have to get real honest about it. I love training.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to love powerlifting because that's where the applause was. And I think that put a heightened sense on that one more pound because the applause came when you hit the PR, the applause came when you won the comp. But in the wake of all that, that's online and it looks great. I go back to the hotel room and it's like, I've been a fucking tornado to my life for the last 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Get it together. Get home, things are pretty good, and then you turn right back around, you got 10 more weeks to go. And it just became this repetitive cycle. And it was like I was a bowling alley lane with the bumpers. I just kept bouncing around between that 10, 20 week model until it broke me down. And I think for a guy like you that has that 4-year mindset, how much emphasis were you putting on the day to day? How much were you looking at, okay, I've got 6 months here where I can kind of, focus on different things, maybe just focus on the gym, throw once or twice a week, maintain my technique work. What was that process like? Because for us, I competed 13 times, whether it was a single lift or I won't say competed. I did high level lifts 13 times in a year. That's stupid. That's once a month.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder I got hurt, right? But for you, how did you pace yourself between those 4 years? Or is there a pace besides blistering?
Well, so to your point, your competition cycle was on a more frequent basis than mine, and John Welborn made a comment the other day about the one of the observations about being a professional athlete, which basically means that you have to maintain a high level, not the maximum level,
right,
but as high a level as possible on average for a whole duration of a season, right? And so early on in my career, I didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of meets.
Right.
So from 97 till 2000, I was on nobody's radar.
Well, you're a giant killer though, right?
Yeah. The only radar I was on was the one that I'd created.
Right.
I was like, right. So I had 4 years and I was a relatively late bloomer. So I was 25 years old before I broke into the world-class ranks, as an overnight success. Right. But I'd spent, at that point, 13 years under the bar at some level. Some of it was really horrible training, which we've talked about in the past, but 13 years under the bar and 12 years of throwing, getting there.
Right.
But at the same time, I didn't have the burnout that a lot of guys have because I wasn't so singularly focused. Yep. And I only had to do 1 or 2 meets a year or whatever. And I'd go to these little local meets, and I was in the Bay Area in California, and we'd do, maybe 4 or 5 meets a year because those were the only meets I could do. And knowing that okay, well, the competition, I'm going to be competing against guys that are going to throw 52 feet, and I'm throwing 65 or 66 at the time. It's not going to be a great competitive environment, so I got to make the most of it. I didn't take a lot of volume of throws either, and I was a very low volume practice guy. Mm-hmm. And I think it worked for me. I mean, I know it worked for me personally, but I think those were some things that were really unique, like not having a lot of, there wasn't a forced competition schedule, because really all I cared about at first was just making the 2000 Olympic team.
Right.
So there was one date in the 2000 Olympic trials. It's July 9th of 2000 or something like that, right? That was the most important date on my calendar for 3 years. I didn't care about anything else. But what's interesting is from 2000 to 2004, I shifted my beliefs, because all of a sudden I went from not making any money of this stuff to making a good amount of money off of competing. And I became a professional. And that was, we had to do 10 meets a year. But even in that, we don't have to do a certain number, but we did probably 8 to 10 meets or 12 to 15 meets or whatever we could do, and how much, maximizing our contracts and all that stuff became sort of like the game at that point. But even still, in that point, like I was very disciplined, because I said, I don't care how much money I make, at least early on, because I'm only doing this for, like, this is not going to be I'm not going to make a career out of this. I kept telling, I was lying to myself, to be honest.
Sure.
But, so like, if I wasn't feeling good, if there was something off, I'd be like, oh, I can't go do this meet. And it would drive my agent crazy. He's like, I booked you in and we've already bought the ticket. I said, I don't care about this meet.
Right.
All I care about is the World Championships. All I care about is the Olympic Games. But you're putting all your eggs in one basket. I said, yeah, but there's 2 ways to make money in this sport.
Mm-hmm.
I can do it incrementally. Like, I can go be average
Mm-hmm.
throughout the whole year and make an average amount of money that ends up being, good money over the course of the year. Or with my risk profile at the time, I can be great when it really matters.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, I wanted to be great when it really matters. And if I'm great if I qualify for the major championships, which I've always felt like I could do, and then I go place number 1 or number 2 in the world at those, or in the World Championships, or win an Olympic Games or whatever it is, the money will take care of itself.
Right.
It'll be so much better, because they don't pay shot putters a whole lot to go win some, podunk meet in the middle of wherever it is.
Yeah.
So that was sort of my approach. I started defining myself by the money by 2004, my success by the money. I started getting frustrated with other people when I look around the sport, and I'd say, oh, this kid who runs the 1500 and, not even a 4-minute miler is making, 3 times more money than I am.
Yeah.
That's just bullshit.
Right.
And it used to irritate, drive me crazy. Anyway, but when I started to focus more on that, and I started to try to be a professional athlete, my quality started to drop, and I started to burn out more frequently, and I started like chasing money rather than like what's really important.
Same here, man. I mean,
so,
I became a lifter that was also trying to develop a coaching system, trying to develop a seminar circuit, trying to develop, help some other friends that were trying to do the same thing. So business consultant, speaker, coach, lifting takes a hit, and you're strong enough, you're good enough to kind of piece it together. But I get it completely. And that brings me to, I'm glad you kind of segued this way yourself. What do you think about the sport now? And I don't want to put you on the spot where something is misconstrued, because I know you still love the sport. The internet, things like Instagram and Facebook have changed the exposure of the sport. And I very much related to what you just said. There are lifters out there who, listen, I think that there's 2 kinds of people in the world, in the business world. There are people who get really successful really quickly, and then time proves whether that was fleeting or if it was real. And then there are people that just kind of chip away and build something, like you say. The internet confuses that a little bit, because talent does not always mean the ability to transfer. But there are a lot of people, and I put myself into this category too, that they become somewhat of a cult of personality, and that drives information, because you may not be the loudest guy in the room, but if you've got a significant following, the message is heard wide. And are there any throwers out there that you wish that, or I don't want to say that individually, but do you just wish you could kind of take these kids and shake them a little bit and be like, do you know how much easier it is? Do you know how much, the sweat off my back helped your career? Do you ever feel any of that? Like, either in a positive way or in an animosity? Because I think a few years ago, I was very angry that my path was much more challenging in some aspects than others. Like you said, I related completely. I'd been competing for 12 years before anybody gave a crap who I was, and people ask me, well, how do you get sponsored? I don't know, because I had a 2,500 pound total in multiply it before I ever got a free pair of wrist straps. Right. And, I think that it's shifted quite a bit now, but that's on the other side of the coin, in that, I'm wearing a Matt Vincent shirt right now, a Hate Brand. That guy can go print a shirt, ship it to you, and say, hey man, post a picture for me. And now he's growing this thing and making something tangible out of nothing. He would not be able to reach the people that he is reaching now without the internet. So the internet's awesome, and it gives us opportunity. But what do you say to these kids that just think they've got it all figured out? And I think it's a universal thing. I think it's a human
totally
thing.
agree. So, sort of first address some of the first part of your comments. Like, I never felt like anybody owed me anything, and I never felt like I owed anybody else anything. The only thing I felt like I owed was to be true to the virtues and the rules that we have in the Olympic Games, and that's a big part of who I am. It's how I define success was competing and winning based on the rules that we agree to compete on. So that was my obligation. As far as is it easier now? I think yes and no. I had this really interesting conversation with these two young throwers, and this is quite a while ago, so they'd now be older guys now. But we were sitting at a bar in Estonia. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a bad joke, right?
or Tuesday for Rudy.
Exactly. And they were they just graduated from college, and they'd had these scholarships, and they were great universities and all this stuff, and had these full rides and all that stuff. I never had any of that.
Right.
And they're sitting there like feeling sorry for themselves because now they have to act like they know there's no money in it right now because like there are only so many athletes that can get sponsored, and guys like me and a couple others had basically taken all the sponsorship opportunities for Americans. And they're like, well, we can't keep training.
Right.
So why not? Well, there's no, I mean, how would I do that? This is not a problem that you're dealing with. This is a condition that you've considered a problem or an obstacle. Problem, like, the guy that's going to speak later today, Brad Snyder, he's blind. He was blinded because I heard his story earlier, but he was blinded because something blew up on him. Literally, like he lost his face, and he's like, it was better my face than my body because if it had hit my body, I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
And but this is a condition that he can't change.
Right.
And if he lets it be a problem, it's a real problem. Not having eyesight is something I don't really want to deal with.
Right.
But that's something he's just accepted and he's moved on. And I hear a lot of these kids say, this is a problem. I said, no. These are conditions. You just see them as problems because you never had to work for anything, quite honestly. And I told them this, and they looked at me like I just, like, you're so insensitive. You don't know what you're talking about. I said, no, I do. I said, because I didn't even have the gifts that you were given. Mm-hmm. I earned everything that I got. So I think what I would say to the young guys is like, look, the only thing that you're guaranteed is a struggle. And I've said this before, but the only thing that you're guaranteed in life is a struggle. How hard it is, how easy it is, that's somewhat situational and somewhat luck and somewhat intentional. What the internet does now is allow, like, media is the thing that drives value to all sports.
Right.
And it used to be that the only distribution that you could actually get from a media standpoint could be, the only way to do that was to go through the large networks. And then this thing called social media happens, and it evolves. And there's the whole thing about democratizing content. Now, you at Brandon Lilly can create a ton of content, create your own followers. It's you running your own network on a really small scale, right? And small being relative, right? I know you've got quite a substantial following too, but there's value there. And so I think the balance that, Olympic sports athletes have right now is, because we don't draw a paycheck from the sport directly, it's all indirect dollars, is what's more important to them? Is it the competition? Is it the gold medal still? Or is it making a living? And the living can come from a couple of different sources now. It used to be that you could only make money from prize money and appearance fees and sponsorships. And now you can actually make your own brand.
Right.
So do they have it easier? Yes. In some ways, they've got another revenue stream that they can tap into because people find what you do, interesting.
Right.
And there's this awesome, like, long tail that you can find. Throwers in power sports, we may be the bottom of the barrel in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of us that are dying and craving this content. Mm-hmm. And if you can put yourself out there, you go global with it now, finding 10,000 people, finding 100,000 people, finding 1 million people when you're looking at a global market at that point is not that hard. It just changes the definition of professional now.
So I've heard you talk about some of your struggle,
right?
The conditions of, living under stairs, things like this. Why don't you tell a little bit about that? Because I think it's really important, for me to translate. You didn't wake up and just become this guy.
Yeah.
It was a series of 10,000 wake ups, where you get up and you get better and you improve. And I think people need to be reminded how hard it was.
Yeah.
I talk about myself. I talk about myself all the time, by the way, but driving 4 times a week up to West Side, 3 hours up, 3 hours back, coming back to a job, and then doing that until I eventually moved up there. What was it like for you when you were that young, hungry, struggling, climbing thrower?
So it is, and humbling is a great word, because I went to a very good school where the expectation was that you're going to go to a bank or consulting firm and make a lot of money, and then after a few years decide if you wanted to go take the couple year sabbatical to go to grad school, basically, and then come back and make even more money, and then give all this. There was a cycle, there was a path that was set to me. So the first big step that I took, and it's relative, right, was to the decision to say, okay, I'm going to forego this guarantee, like financially successful world, and pursue my passion. And that was a really hard decision for me. I did that somewhat begrudgingly maybe at first, because I always wanted to do things. I wanted to make my father happy.
Yeah.
I wanted to make my mom happy and proud. And I just saw that traditional path as something that would please them. And when I made that first decision, my dad was like the most supportive person. My mom was the most supportive person about it. They were like, this is great. You've got a short window of opportunity to pursue this. Go do this. So I packed up my stuff and I drove across country, and I moved into this house. It was called The Stable because it had a bunch of track athletes that lived in it. There were 11 athletes at the time living in a 5-bedroom house, all, between the ages of like, say, 21 and 20 or 22 and maybe 28 or so, all training for the 2000 Olympics. And they said they'd had a room for me, and they called it the bubble. This was the name, because it's the room that you waited on until another room opened up.
Right.
And I was like, okay, cool, I'll whatever. And I get there, and like, it's not, it's not very big. It's literally like it's just under the stairs. And I'm thinking like, maybe it's a little. And literally, I show up, and there's a single mattress laid underneath the stairs. There's no room on either side.
Yeah.
And it's literally a closet underneath the stairs, sloping ceiling. And it was just basically like a little commune for track athletes, but it cost me $200 a month. And so it gave me, the right price point.
Yeah.
And it was those were some of the greatest days of my life, and hardest days too. I knew I had to work. I didn't want to work. I could always do physical labor because I always felt like I was physically strong, but I knew that was going to compete with my ability to actually be good when I needed it. So I was like, well, I have some friends out here, connections out here in the banking world, and I ended up getting a job at Merrill Lynch as a financial consultant. And my theory was that I could get to work really early when the market opened, because it was West Coast, and so I'd get in before 6 a.m. and be out, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and go do my training in the afternoon. And I thought it was a great plan. Except there were a couple other things, is that, Merrill wanted me to actually produce. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can't just produce during the hours that you want to produce at. So like my days quickly became like started at 6 a.m. Or a little before that, like 5:30 for work, and then get out at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, and then 4 o'clock, and then 5 o'clock, and then 6 o'clock. Because in that time, you basically dialed for dollars. So you're just calling people and getting turned down, and you're trying to like say, we can working on this particular product that we're selling, so to speak. And you get told no a lot. And, but it's the whole business rewards time in, and that cumulative value of that time over time hopefully pays off. But it got to be a point where I was working like 12 or 13 hours a day, and I would come home, change clothes real quick, and then go back out and train. And I wouldn't get back from training until 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night. And it wasn't sustainable. I was sleeping about 4 hours every single night. And I believed in this theory called the sleep camel, that I could sleep, maybe 8 or 10 hours over the weekend.
Yep.
And then it doesn't work that way. But I was young. I was young enough that I could do anything anyway at the time. And so, but it took a while. And then I finally broke. Like I broke mentally and physically, emotionally too at the time. I tore my pec It was kind of a freak thing. I I wasn't really, I had no balance in my life because I was so focused on like the work and the training. And like when I did do anything social, I would just drink like crazy because that's just how I define, like everything was a competition. Right. And so like even the drinking was a competition, like, right. It just wasn't a good place to be. Training was going great, aside from the fact that I started getting hurt more, and but it was hard. Like that's the struggle. So the struggle takes different shapes. Sometimes it's just a singular physical challenge. Sometimes it challenges you to sort of redefine who you are and what your values are and how you're going to structure your day to be successful. And it took me, a pretty serious injury that almost cut my Olympic career short to really change. We don't really change until we're forced to change,
Amen to that.
Yeah. So but that was the struggle for me. And I didn't have any money coming in from the support. People are like, oh, did you go to the training center? Well, the training center didn't recognize me as a valuable hopeful at the time.
Right.
Because I didn't qualify high enough. I was maybe number 10 or 12 or 13 or 15 in the country. And maybe about the same globally, top 25 or so globally. And the requirements to get in there were really high, but so that wasn't an option for me. There were no stipends or no support packages that you could get. For 3 years, the only money that I made from track and field was by chance. I was invited to go to the Goodwill Games, and I made $1,500 off of track and field. And then, I make my first Olympic team, and I signed this, sponsorship. That pays me $15,000 a year with some bonuses built on performance. And so I'm looking at this with the $15,000. That's just that's actually, it was $10,000. Excuse me, $10,000 base. And I'm like, this is sort of a joke in terms of like a sponsorship.
Yeah.
But then I had this, and I'm kind of just spinning off here, but I had this conversation with the head of the track and field sponsor program at the company that was my sponsor at the time. And he said, the less your event looks like the 100, the mile, or the marathon, the less you mean to me.
Right.
And people hear that and they're like, oh, you're devaluing all this. No.
Yeah.
He's trying to sell a product.
Right.
And because my product didn't, what my output didn't line up perfectly with his product, it's not his fault. That's my fault. I made a dumb decision because I love to throw,
right,
and I love to lift and all this other stuff. So that was really hard to sort of deal. But what we ended up doing over the next 4 years was elevating the visibility of throwing. We had a great group of guys that were consistently there. There was a lot of like they were good people. We didn't have anybody that tested positive that put a black eye on the core people at that time, and that allowed us to lift the visibility of throwing and reestablish it as a great event to support some of those superstar events.
For sure. So how did you, talking about the transition of young athlete, hungry athlete, progressing, maybe getting a sponsorship, what did you feel? I mean, I've had some pretty cool phone calls in my life, or those moments where you made it. What was the feeling, and where were you when you finally knew that you made the Olympic team? And what did that feel like? Was it what you thought it would be, or was it more? Was it less?
It's overwhelming, right?
Right.
And there's never one easy way to describe it. But when I first realized I made the Olympic team, and then the first time I realized I was an Olympian. 2000 at the 2000 Olympic trials, I was stepping in the ring for my last throw, and as I'm putting the shot against my neck, I remember when that shot touched my neck, I was like, I'm already on the team. Let's just do something awesome. I don't remember exactly what I said to myself, right, but and when I did that, everything went, and I threw this, what now is Olympic trials record still, and ended up winning those trials. And I remember running out and being like, not only am I Olympic, I made my first Olympic team. I'm an Olympian. This is, it was all this huge rush of emotion that I can't even explain. I remember I jumped, and Andy Bloom, who was one of my competitors and teammates at the time, was right there. And I'm literally like, he's celebrating because both of us were sort of long shots to make the team, I guess, depending on who you talk to. And I jump up, and I almost went over the top of him. Like, there's actually a picture of my knees at his nose, and he's a 6'1", 6'2" guy. Yeah. And I think that was like the first time I was like, I made the team. Like, this is awesome. And it was so validating. But the moment that I walked into the Sydney Olympic Stadium, you're walking down this tunnel, and it's, you see this light literally at the end of the tunnel, and it opens up more as you get closer, and more and more and more and more. And then it opens up into this 115,000 seat, like capacity packed stadium.
Right.
And I was like, I'm here. Mm-hmm. This isn't, I'm here. So this is my story. Mm-hmm. That was probably the moment that it really hit me that I was an Olympian now.
I think the cool thing about that is you're always an Olympian now. Yeah. And I don't identify myself, out of respect to the sport and to the lifters now, I don't identify myself as a power lifter currently, but I'll always be a power lifter. I'll always understand to some level what it's like to get under a huge weight, come up with it more times than not, but I think that connection is so special, because it was interesting watching you tell that. I could see you were going back to it, and those moments in our life really string together something beautiful, mm-hmm. those highlights. How did you come home from that? I mean, after this ultimate high, after this, there's a little bit of that successful hangover, I think is what they call it. What do I do now? Or did it immediately was just the next games is mine?
Like I said, I would love to say that it was as simple as me just saying 4 more years. So what ended up happening is I thought this was a short-term thing. So I was going to do this until 2000. And then after that whole year and sort of experiencing what it was like to be this Olympic shot putter and traveling all over the world that year. And I was like, this is pretty cool. I'm going to do this for 4 more years. But yeah, so you go from that high, and then you start and to the whole motivation for me behind the Olympic Games, I want to be becoming an Olympic hopeful,
right?
Was really based off this amateur notion of Olympism. Mm-hmm. I bought into all those virtues. I bought into all that stuff, like everything that about the Olympic Games that they sell you on, about the Olympic brand and all that stuff. That was me. Mm-hmm. That was so cool to me. And then I had this experience where I go to the Olympic Games, and now I'm an Olympian, and now I'm actually dealing with the struggle of being an Olympian. And I kind of felt like, I don't know if I felt like I was actually owed something, and maybe I did at some level. And I can tell you later I did, but I started seeing below the surface, mm-hmm. pulling back the curtain. You're like, wow, the ideals don't always match up with the reality.
Right.
And there was a lot of internal struggle there. And as my motivation shifted away from the amateur notion,
right.
I started not liking who I was and what I was doing. And the only thing that was really filling that void, and the only reason why I was doing it was I was making a pretty decent paycheck, and I could have these moments that I could share with people later. Oh, I went to this place and I hung out with this guy, and I was like, boy, I was a mile wide and an inch deep. So
yeah.
They were great years, but they were some of my.
You're selling your soul.
Yeah.
I mean, and I hate that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, you're right.
But it is, because you're trading these things. You sat here, and it's not just this podcast. I've heard you talk about the value system. Mm-hmm. What is your purpose? What is your meaning? What are the values that you hold dear? So I believe that about you. I believe those things are important. But then the opportunity it's like, I've done this for 20 years now. I see the truth behind it. If I walk away, I got nothing, or I can just keep going. I can just keep digging through the sludge, right? And there's a compromise to that. I think devalue may not be the right word, and it may be the exactly right word. I think you start to become somewhat of a dependent upon that, And then you're in a real cycle because you're not doing it because you want to anymore. You're doing it because you have to, you know?
Well, it's familiar,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a hard thing to break. So I know people that have been in jobs that they say, I hate. Well, why don't you change that? But it's the familiarity of it.
Sure.
And they don't know what the other side, the grass is not always greener. We've become a little more cynical. And for me, it was like, not only was it familiar, but I could make a good living and I could travel around the world and I could do all these things that I think other people thought were really cool. And I think I was trying to convince myself that that was the reason why I did this. And
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't it. And that was really hard for me. And I almost quit.
Yeah.
I got married in 2004 and I have an amazing wife. I'm thankful for the struggles that I went through as an Olympic athlete because they helped me grow my relationship with her at different times of our lives as well. But like I remember we were getting married, and she's like, "Do you really enjoy what you're doing?" I'm like, "No, not really." Why are you doing it? Because it pays the bills right now.
Right.
And she's like, "Well, then change."
Right.
And I literally, I was having major motivational issues going into the 2004 Olympic trials. I literally had like the best throw in the world at the time by about 3 feet. And I'm like, this is great. Cool.
Right.
Whatever. I'm still never going to make as much money as that 100-meter guy who got paid $60,000 just to go do a race.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is that possible? How do they not value me when they use me for marketing? I just was asking all the wrong questions and seeking all the wrong answers and seeing everything the wrong way. And I couldn't change my lens. Like I couldn't change the focus. And I was like, I'm done after this Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, I'm done after this Olympics.
Yeah.
If I was really committed to it, if I really believed that, I would have said, I should walk away right now. But I went to the Olympic trials, and just because I was in great shape and I could do it, and I was lucky. I ended up winning that Olympic trials as well and making the team. I was like, well, I'm on the team,
right?
So I'm going to go to Athens. Go to Athens, and that competition obviously plays out a different way. But something kind of happened. I started to believe again between the Olympic trials and the Olympics, because that's when like all of these values that you actually do believe, they get forced on you again. You get sort of indoctrinated in it. And so I was kind of starting to believe that. I kind of felt like I did in 99 and 2000 when I was a pure amateur. The only reason why I was doing it was because I loved it. Mm-hmm. And this is what I wanted to do. And then in 2004, that competition plays out the way it plays out. And I don't want to jump too far into that, because if that'll take.
We got time to do more of these later.
Yeah. But after that competition, the immediate result of that competition was anger and frustration, and like, holy shit, I just lost out on 2 Olympic medals, gold medals, by less than 2.5 inches over the last 4 years. I'm not going to walk out on this. This is not going to be my story. This is not going to be my ending in this part of my career. So I was like, I'm going to go do this. And then I had this like conversation with my sponsor, and like, you're only good enough for second. And you're getting old.
Wow.
And they didn't say it quite like that.
No, I know, but yeah.
And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? And now there wasn't the financial stability that even that, crap, it was a really cheap contract before, but it gave me some financial stability. I didn't have that anymore.
Right.
And I woke up at first and it was like anger. I was just training out of anger. And then finally my wife, because she does this, she calls me out. She says, "You're just a miserable person to be around. Last year was motivations. This year, you're just angry all the time. Like, what do you like? This is not worth it."
Right.
And something happened over that year. And I say this, I never had any motivation issues after the 2004 Olympics, because it was an anger that translated into love of the sport again. And I started to love the process again. I didn't give a crap about the results anymore. I didn't give a crap about the money. What I knew is that if I came in and I dominated this process,
right,
the process could make me a champion by what others people's consider, like the standards that other people consider champions. But if I own this process and I win the day on this process,
yeah,
I'm going to get whatever I want out of the sport. And that was like, that's where I really sort of grew as a person and found happiness and contentness. And for a long time until at some point, like, you have a wife, I have a wife and two kids, and financial stability and things like the business side of it does actually matter. And you realize you're losing the battle to father time, and you just can't win that one. There's nothing you can do on that one. And there was no way I could fight it any longer. I was like, well, I've got to leave now. And that was 15 years longer than what, I thought I would actually do it.
Right.
So
you brought up your wife a couple times here, and I know you've spoken about her very, very highly nearly every time I've been around you. Do you think you would be sitting here if it weren't for her?
No. I mean, look, people see, and we've talked about this, the things that people want to see, right? And Instagram and all the social media sort of helps that right now. You only see the times when people are winning, right? And even before social media, like that's all you saw, because when the cameras are on, you go,
right.
But I don't think it's probably a little too much to say my life to my wife, but I pretty much owe her everything. She was always a voice of reason. She was a voice of consolation. She was a voice that helped me sort of when I would, in those moments when I'd feel sorry for myself, in those moments where I was feeling down, in those moments where there weren't enough moments for me to peel the happiness off the, like, hey, I've got this new shiny toy.
Right.
And that moment she had always had a way of asking the right question and framing it the right way, and challenging me to be a better person. And she still does. And, she's just an amazing woman, and I'm really fortunate in that regard.
Regrets.
Regrets. In hindsight, I wish that I'd been a little bit more, I wish that I hadn't been chasing, all the moments, not competitively necessarily, but like I was trying to live up to a stereotype, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And so not only did I have to lift big, I had to live large, not necessarily spending money like that, but like live large in the sense of if we were going to party, we were going to be partiers.
Yeah.
And I didn't do drugs and things like that, but I could just drink and I wanted to, like, those guys are crazy. And at times, like, I really, like, that was like what, and I was like, that's really so far from who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And I allowed myself to start falling into that trap when I was in college, when I was dealing with like concussions and the depressions of those things, which were real. And it's taken me 20 some odd years to really address some of those things and unpack some of those things. But I wish that I had the courage to truly define who I was as a person 25 years ago, and then stay true to that person rather than like try to be what I thought someone else wanted me to be for a while and someone else over here. But tying it back to my wife, like she was always the thing that sort of helped me pull back down this line.
Yep.
So I wish I could have done that better. But that's probably my biggest regret. I mean, there's probably some other things that I said, well, I probably shouldn't have done that specific thing, but
right.
Those are also character building.
Absolutely. Well, I think just as in sport, I was talking to Rudy about it last night. He said, what do you have to do to your body to become stronger? You have to break it down.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, in Rudy's own way, I can't pontificate like he did, but he just went on to say that I think because of all the struggle and the hurt that I felt, whether it was from the outside looking in or if it was, we got some people. Thanks. Room service was trying to come in and get on the podcast. But if there's been that much hurt, the rebuilding is going to be pretty great. If you can stay on that path of rebuilding and evolution. And man, I am telling you, like I look at you and guys like Rudy and myself, and there's others too. I can remember we're probably 5 summer strongs removed from when I first met you guys.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of change in 5 years.
Yep.
And my hope is the people that hear this understand, and we didn't even talk about so many things. We definitely need a part 2 and part 3, but I want people to understand there is a heavy price for the success, but it's worthwhile if you just keep your nose to the grindstone, Tyler Childers reference, and you keep going on, because I really like Adam Nelson. I like the guy sitting across from me right now. And like I tell people all the time when I do podcasts, I'm not sure 5 years ago you would have liked the guy sitting across the table from you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you feel a lot of that too? Like, do you feel like you're a person that you like?
Yeah, I mean,
or do you like yourself? You know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. But I think, you know, I've struggled. The struggles that I face today are different than the ones that I faced 20 years ago. They were much easier to quantify.
Sure.
20 years ago, because they were physical challenges, and there were some personal challenges, but I chose not to like go down that way. Today, you know, I jokingly say that we're all kind of coming into our midlife crisis about the same time. But today, the challenge is defining who we are as men and women, and, you know, what we want our role for the future to be. And I feel like in the last few years, a lot of the self-reflection I've done, the work that I've done, the heaviest lifting I've done has been about defining my character as a non-athlete.
Yeah.
What do I want that person to look like? How do I want my children to see me? How do I want my family to see me? What is the definition of success? Mm-hmm. There's no more 4 more year mantra. There's no more gold medal for me to chase. That's someone else's, really goal for me. What are my goals?
Right.
And what's the process it's going to take to get there? And, when you come out of a life where sports and activity are the things that help you accomplish your goals, you think that there's no applicable skill sets that you have in this new you. And it's really only been in the last, I would say 18 months where I've realized the things that make me great as an athlete will make me great in my post-athletic career if I allow them to, and don't constantly devalue them. You've got so much strength, not physical strength, mm-hmm. but mental strength that allowed you to be great as an athlete. And now you just have to find a way to support that, without having the objective of lifting as much weight as possible.
Right.
It's lifting as much weight in a figurative sense as possible.
So do you know Craig Ballantyne? You heard his name?
Yeah.
Okay. So he has this book called The Perfect Day. Mm-hmm. I took one of his business courses, and it was really, really great in that we talked about this fixed point mm-hmm. mark, right? So a lot of times I think when you start a business or when you're starting out as an athlete, there's so much information, right? So we go to this, and he said, what's your perfect day? What are you working for? What are you killing yourself out here for? And I was like, I just want financial stability. I want to be able to retire. I want to be able to travel. And he's like, that's just blue sky, man. Let's narrow it down. He said, what are you working for? Your perfect day. He said, tell me the greatest, most perfect day in your life that you can imagine, and that you're working towards that. And it was this scenario, which I'm actually doing in small part. My family's going to Salt Lake in a couple of weeks, but for me, my perfect day was, and this is sky is the limit. You do whatever you want. Private jet, Barcelona, paella, streets, flamenco music. There's this beautiful sound, smells, the sights. I'm closing my eyes talking now.
Love it, man. I love it.
My mom, my dad, my son, my family with me there.
Yeah.
Because to me, Spain is this place that is love.
Yeah.
And that would be the penultimate moment for me, was to be able to just take them over there, take my mom shopping, show my dad the architecture, the churches, the things that he's into, and then to come together and watch a sunset around a meal. That's what I'm working for. What's your perfect day?
This is a great exercise here.
Sorry guys, I've been sick for about 2 days. I think it's allergies, but I've had some nose stuff for a couple of days.
My eyes are watering too from the allergies. My perfect day, I don't think it's a lot different than yours. Maybe it's a different setting.
Yeah.
But my perfect day is the day that I've got 2 children. And my perfect day is the day that I see them become the people that they want to become, and not the people that I want them to become.
Right.
My perfect day is that day, and when my wife and I are sitting on our back porch drinking a glass of wine, enjoying a lot of the same things, and we can sit down and say, we did a pretty good job.
Right.
Family has always been important to me. But I think when you do this exercise, like I think it helps you define your values. And I brought that up several times. Because they're the things that they're the things that drive you.
Right.
Yeah. They're the things that, what I've realized in my life is that if I'm making decisions where I'm looking backwards going like is that going to come back?
Right.
I'm not living the life that I want to have.
Right.
And so that's like integrity is really important to me, the honesty and all those other things. And there's a certain level of financial success that will afford you the private plane.
It takes money to live.
So,
right?
But, and it takes money to raise kids, as you know, too. But I think for me, like that perfect day is that day when I see my children become the people that they want to become. That day when I hear, when my wife and I can sit back, the kids may not say this to us. But when my wife and I can sit back and say, you know what, we did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
They are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And because I really live through my children, I think now, more so than they probably will ever realize. Yeah. So,
well, man, I think that's a great place to end, because that's who I see you as now. I see you as the guy working towards that moment. And this is part one. I'll just go ahead and put it on the record. This is part one of many. But Adam, I say this, and again, the allergies are starting to kick up. You've been a guy that probably don't understand how much you've pulled me along. You've been a tugboat. So
I appreciate it,
brother. I appreciate you guys. This was an awesome one. I hope it meant as much to you guys as it meant to me to sit down here with a guy that I really will say is a hero of mine. And let's be legendary.
Oh,
have a great day.